Thank you for tuning in to Abundant Moments. In the Gospels, there is an account of a woman who was caught in the act of adultery. And in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they were still under the Old Covenant. And under the Old Covenant, if you were caught in the act of adultery, you should be stoned to death. Now, this is an interesting account because this woman was caught in the act. And, as I always say, why were these guys standing outside the window watching? And also, where was the man? It takes two to tango, as they say. But anyway, she was caught in the act of adultery, and so they bring her to Jesus because Jesus was trying to implement grace. He was showing everybody love, grace, and mercy. And the religious crowd of his day didn't like that because they wanted everybody to line up with the law. They wanted to be able to point their fingers at other people and say, hey, look, they've done this and I'm better than them. And we still have some people, sadly enough, like that today. But they brought this woman to Jesus and they said, she was caught in the act. And under the law of Moses, now she's supposed to be stoned to death. And they were waiting to see what Jesus would say, because they were going to say, no matter what he said, that, he was wrong. And they were going to see if he was going to actually stone her to death, because they knew he'd been showing everyone, as I said, love, grace, and mercy. So Jesus begins to write in the sand. He takes a stick and he's writing in the sand, and nobody knows what he said. When I get to heaven, I want to ask him what he wrote there in the sand. I think that he wrote some of the names of some of the men because maybe they'd been with her too, who knows. But anyways, he began to write in the sand, and this woman is standing there. And you got to imagine what she was going through, because I studied when they would stone somebody to death, what would happen. And it was terrible. It's not like they would take little stones, but there were different things that they would do. And I wish I had time to go through it all. But one of them, they would take them up to a cliff and they would just push them over onto large stones. And another way they would do it was would take large stones and just bludgeon them to death. And just a terrible thing that would happen. So here's this woman standing there, wondering if her life is getting ready to be taken from her. And here are these men that are accusing her. And so she feels all this guilt and shame and fear. And so Jesus writes in the sand, and then he says, "He who is without sin, go ahead, cast that first stone." And the Bible says, from the eldest to the youngest, everyone put down their stones. They were ready to put her life away from her. They put down their stones and they left. And the woman was standing there. Can you imagine as they were leaving how she's feeling? Like, wow, maybe I'm not going to die. What's happening here? And then Jesus gave her a gift. And the gift was no condemnation. He said, "Where are your accusers now?" He said, "No one condemns you, and neither do I. Go and sin no more." What a beautiful thing. He gave her the gift of no condemnation. I want to ask you today, do you hold others accountable? Do you constantly say, well, I remember when you did this? And when you get into a fight with somebody, do you get, historical, not hysterical? Do you go back in history and say, you did this and you did that? Let's give the gift of no condemnation. Let's receive that for ourselves from God, because he doesn't want us to live in guilt and condemnation, but he doesn't want us to make others feel guilty about what they've done either. He wants us to give the gift of no condemnation. Jesus gave that to us at the cross in the same way he gave it to this woman there. What a beautiful thing. No condemnation. Jesus taught them and us a lesson. We need to show mercy and grace and receive the gift of no condemnation and give it. Thank you for tuning in.